That story she just told you was a lie. None of it even happened. She went on to her Instagram account to go live to tens of millions of people across the country to straight up tell you all a story that didn't even exist. If I want to own a damn rocket launcher to overtake the tyrant government, that's my business. If I want to own a bazooka because I feel that the government is out of control and we now need to go up against them, that is my right. It is not their right to tell me what weapon I'm going to use. God forbid this country gets to that point. Remember, the Second Amendment right gives us the right to bear arms, to defend ourselves, and overtake a tyrant government. And if I want to use a tank to do that, that is nobody's business but my own. If there was really an insurrection, let's think about this for a second. If an insurrection really occurred where a group of extremists tried to overtake the government or tried to disrupt their active business that day, tried to overturn an election, do you really think a single Republican or any politician for that matter would back Trump? Here is where I will defend the situation. Before you call me a monster and an animal for defending the situation, I will say this. The cop was following a procedure. And this is what's wrong with America. The procedures have been allowed the entire time. And you'll notice none of these cops are going to actually go to prison. They're all going to be let off scot-free. You don't even need a crystal ball. Okay, I don't have to be a fortune teller to tell you right now that every single one of these cops that killed a black person and is now being accused of that event will get let off. Why are we printing money? Why are we borrowing money to give to people who aren't even necessarily in financial trouble to begin with? I was all for helping the American people out, and I still am. But I never agreed with the fact that we need to be recklessly printing money to help out people who might want to decide to buy a third BMW this year. That is not what the stimulus package is for. The lockdown measures in New York State clearly have not worked. Cases are spiking again as we speak. New York can't seem to get a grip on it, even though we're telling everybody to stay indoors. How about the fact that not every teacher wants to get vaccinated? What are we going to do then? Homeschool for the rest of our lives? That story she just told you was a lie. None of it even happened. She went on to her Instagram account to go live to tens of millions of people across the country to straight up tell you all a story that didn't even exist. If I want to own a damn rocket launcher to overtake the tyrant government, that's my business. If I want to own a bazooka because I feel that the government is out of control and we now need to go up against them, that is my right. It is not their right to tell me what weapon I'm going to use. God forbid this country gets to that point. Remember, the Second Amendment right gives us the right to bear arms, to defend ourselves, and overtake a tyrant government. And if I want to use a tank to do that, that is nobody's business but my own. If there was really an insurrection, let's think about this for a second. If an insurrection really occurred where a group of extremists
never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
We all knew that defunding the police was ultimately going to come back and bite us in the ass. And over the weekend, Minneapolis, Minnesota confirmed exactly that. Surprise, surprise, it's not working. And now the city has unanimously voted to invest $6 million into, guess what? Police. Are you surprised? I mean, that's what happens when you wipe out the concept of law and order. It doesn't work. You need law enforcement to maintain discipline throughout the community. It's not rocket science. The Democrats, however, felt that they could try a little bit different of an initiative. Well, it didn't work. The city quickly became overrun with autonomous zones and criminals that decided to hijack the communities. So here we are months later. It's official. It's been an utter and epic fail. And all over the nation, crime is up, stabbings are up, homicides are up, shootings are up. Everything is up except law enforcement numbers. Those, however, are on a rapid decline that cities are now scrambling to try and make up. Let's head over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam and take a look at our first post today that happens to be on Fox News on just how badly off Minneapolis, Minnesota is by defunding the police. Now, if you guys remember, Minneapolis, Minnesota is where it all started. Very sad event with George Floyd, Officer Derek Chauvin, who knelt on the neck of George Floyd and ultimately killed him. It was a horrible thing that we all witnessed. It was disgusting how he acted, morally, ethically. It was wrong, 100% wrong. Legally, however, is a different story. It was actually right. Because procedures allowed policemen in that city, in that department, to kneel on the neck of a suspect in order to detain him. It's as simple as that. And that is why Derek Chauvin is going to be let off. And it's very sad that a lot of people think or are hoping that justice is served or going to be served in this case. But it's not going to be, because it was allowed in the first place. So we'll see what happens with the trial as it unfolds. But it's where, in Minnesota, this is where the whole defund the police concept was born. They tried it. We let the Democrats play their little games. And unfortunately, it completely backfired and is now being considered amongst the Minneapolis community a serious, epic fail. So Fox News reports Minneapolis on Friday backtracked on its original push to defund the city's police department in the wake of George Floyd's police custody death after residents begged. Now the residents, remember, are now begging the city to hire more officers. Funny that. Just a few months ago, they were telling us that defunding the police was the best idea in the world. Now, all of a sudden, they're crying and begging the city, please hire more officers. We are desperate here. We are sick of our communities being overrun by gangs and thugs. So they want more officers, citing longer response times and increased violent crime. So you've got longer response times and a tremendous amount of increased violent crimes. As a matter of fact, things are so bad in Minnesota that there are actually long periods of waiting time when you call 911. I was listening to Fox News this morning, and they were discussing the fact that you now have to be put on hold, or there's waiting times, there's a waiting line on the phone to actually get a hold of a 911 operator. I don't care where you stand on this topic. I don't think any one of us would ever actually want to be put on hold when we're trying to get hold of a 911 dispatcher. Usually that means something's pretty wrong here. And the last thing we want to do is sit there with nice little elevator music telling us to wait a minute. We'll get to your potential murder in about 5 minutes. That's not how it works, or at least it shouldn't work. So it's totally backfired. Let's take a look at the article. In Minneapolis, there's a big push to defund police, the whole concept of defunding the police backfires after residents complain of slow response times and increase in crime. Homicides are up 100%. Shootings are up 500%. I mean, crime is off the hook in cities like Minneapolis, in Democrat-run cities where defund the police has become a mainstream initiative. So the city council, and this is what cracks me up, the city council on Friday voted unanimously to approve a $6.4 million in additional funding for the police department. So at first, they wanted to defund the police. Now they're about to invest $6.4 million into police. I mean, if this wasn't the most counterproductive narrative I have ever seen, I mean, what a waste of money this city just went through. God knows how much money they spent defunding the police before they realized it wasn't working. Now they're going to spend $6 million backtracking and admitting they were wrong. So what exactly do they need to spend $6 million on? Well, their law enforcement numbers are down so badly that they need to spend a tremendous amount of money on increasing law enforcement by roughly 200 police officers. So the department says that it only has 638 officers available to work, roughly 200 fewer than usual. Why do we think that is? Well, they were probably sick of not being given the tools needed to go fight crime. So law enforcement numbers are way down, 200 fewer than usual in this specific situation, which is an unprecedented number of officers quit or went on extended medical leave after Floyd's death and the unrest that followed. I mean, these officers are scared for their lives. Do we blame them? They're out there protecting us. They're out there risking their lives every day. These law officers or law enforcement officers, they have children to go home to. They have spouses to go home to. Just like you and I, they have families that love them very much. And they'd like for their father or mother or wife or husband or son or brother or sister to not die that day. And when you hear of cities discuss potentially removing the tools that they need to get the job done or keep them as safe as we possibly can, who the hell would want to be a law enforcement officer? Who would want to go out there and risk their life for you if they didn't have the tools that they needed to do it? So officers all over the country are quitting left, right, and center, and we're home in our comfy residences expecting that when something goes wrong, not if, but when, that they're just going to come running to our beck and call. It doesn't work like that. Why on earth would we ever expect these officers who put their life in such danger to risk their lives for us to come running to our aid after we've shamed them and defunded them and taken away the tools that they need to fight our problems? So it's no wonder that these officers are sick of it. They are on extended leave because of it. They've straight up quit the department. We've seen mayors leave. We've seen chief of police leave. We've seen a mass exodus in law enforcement all over the country, across several different cities. And where it all started in Minnesota, we're finally seeing the backlash that's come from it. It was overrun with thugs and criminals and gang members. Autonomous zones were set up, armed with men with machine guns, and the police couldn't do anything about it. They weren't going to risk their life. Not if the mayor and the Democrats and the governors of those cities or states were happy to allow it. So there you have it. Cities are being overrun. Law enforcement's down. And now they are scrambling to build their law enforcement agencies again. And millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, is now going to be needed. More taxpayer money. So let's think about this for a second. Not only did we spend a tremendous amount of taxpayers' monies rebuilding the buildings that were burnt down or attacked, or cities that were destroyed, property defaced from the whole movement, not only are we now on the hook for tens of millions of dollars per city, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on how bad these cities were overrun, but now we're on the hook to hire all these people back. So it's a total double whammy against the taxpayers. All because the Democrats thought they knew best. Clearly, they now have realized that law and order is by far the way to go when fighting crime. Sadly, they had to play with our lives to get to that point. I'm glad we're finally there. Let's see what the American people have to say about the insanity of defunding the police, and Minneapolis now backtracking on their plan to defund the police after residents complain. Tawny says, this is insane. Look at all the National Guards in Washington. Ludicrous. Absolutely no need for that. Send them home. President Trump offered his help there to stop the riots and violence. But oh no, we can't have that. That is sickening. Pelosi has totally lost her mind, along with the Democrats that run that city. What in God's name is wrong with the Democrat supporters continually voting Democrats in? They see what's happening, and do they care? Of course not. And they all know that. Never seen anything like it. Can only hope the ones that aren't Democrats stand up against them. The Democrats aren't going to change, never have and never will. Will continue to ruin our great country, makes us sick to our stomachs because it's the truth. So there's clearly a great deal of frustration and anger towards the Democrats. And let's be honest, we're only really seeing these problems in Democrat-run cities, Democrat-run states. And just like defund the police backfiring, we're now also seeing lockdowns backfiring. We don't see these problems in Florida. We don't see these problems in Texas. Why? Because they appreciate law and order. They appreciate freedom. So yes, there's a lot of hostility right now towards Democratic-run states. There's a lot of anger towards Democratic governors, Democratic lawmakers, Democratic politicians, and Democratic supporters. But can you blame everybody for feeling this way? Because there is a very consistent trend here right now. And the trend tells us that Democrats keep making bad decisions for this country. And the data is now showing this. And residents of these Democratic-run cities and states are now furious and have admitted that these decisions were wrong in the first place. Beat says, but only after the Progress City Council put the police officers through hell, so they suffered stress, took early retirement, got killed, all while being vilified through the press. She's absolutely right. We vilified our law enforcement officers. We shamed them. We treated them like garbage. And then we get it wrong. And now we just expect them to come running back. They're furious. And if we experience a decade of this defund the police or the catastrophe that came from the defunding the police, then we deserve it. Because this was by far the worst thing that we could have ever done to the very men and women who protect us and keep us safe. They were stressed. They retired early. Sadly, some were killed. So no, don't expect them to come running back now just because the Democrats have admitted they got it wrong. And we can now officially classify the defund the police movement as an epic failure. Michael says, who would have thought defunding the police would lead to more crime? Sarcasm. It seemed like it made so much sense not. Wait till they attack Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. then we can watch the crime rates go up in the suburbs as well as the cities. That's a great point. So far, the movement has really only attacked cities. It hasn't really trickled in to the suburbs. Why do you think that is? Well, it's because there's a lot more guns in the suburbs. And if you remember, during the Defund the Police movement, or at least in the very beginning of it, when it was very fresh and new to all of our minds, there was a lot of talk on social media from residents in the suburbs saying, I'd like you to come out here and try that BS in our community. We'll see if any of you actually make it out alive. Why? Because they have guns, a lot of guns in the suburbs. So you didn't see crime trickle into the suburbs. You only saw crime stay very isolated downtown in cities where perhaps a lot of residents don't own guns, or they aren't brave enough to stick up to the madness. So they stayed there. They didn't come into the suburbs. But you better know, or better believe, that if the Second Amendment rights start to get attacked, that you may start to see a great deal of crime go up in the suburbs due to how many residents take their Second Amendment rights very seriously. Kelly says the Dems just wanted it to look bad for Trump. At some point, the local demographic voter must see, or the local Democratic voter must see, the Dems in office don't really care about their constituents. They just wanted Trump out and to take power. They are fascists. It's very true. I think the Democrats' hatred for Donald Trump clouded their judgment a bit. I think their obsession with making sure that he can never run again clouded their decision-making process, or completely derailed a responsible decision-making process. I think they let Trump get the best of them, and I think now they're realizing that instead of focusing on Trump, they should have maybe focused on making their cities better. Maybe they should have focused more on police reform, which I completely agree with, by the way. I think police reform, better training, improved procedures so that we never allow another policeman or women to be able to kneel on the neck of a suspect. I agree with that. And I think that we do need police reform. Defunding the police was the wrong term, perhaps. Maybe we should have spoke more about transferring the transfer of funds from maybe law enforcement to actually rebuilding communities, which again, I'm all for, which makes me laugh when people call us out for not caring, when we slam the likes of the BL movement, or when we slam defund police. We're called white supremacists or racists. No, we're not trying to put down Black Lives Matter. What we're saying is that we don't believe the movement was handled the way that truly helped these communities rebuild themselves. We're still all wondering where all that money is. The hundreds of millions of dollars that was raised for the BL movement is supposed to be going into rebuilding and making Black communities safer. We're not seeing that. That is why we continue to call the movement out. Not because we're against Black people talking about racism, or we're against Black people wanting an equal shot in life. We want that for the Black community, but we don't see it happening. So we're now wondering what our politicians are doing with all the Black Lives Matter money. And this goes into my same argument with defund the police. If you're taking all that money away and you're not putting it into the communities, then why are we defunding the police in the first place? What are we actually doing with that money? That's the real argument that so many Black people fail to see or recognize, because they're too busy accusing us of being racist or white supremacist. But if we actually had a decent conversation about it, as soon as everybody calms down, we might all realize we're just on the same page. So I'm all for police reform. I'm all for better training. I'm all for improved procedures. amended procedures that help defend suspects much better than we are now. But what I am not okay with and have zero tolerance for is the actual defund the police movement. And clearly, neither is Minnesota, the very first state, and Minneapolis, the very first city to actually launch that movement. It's completely backfired. Jeffrey says in December, they moved $8 million to other programs. That left $171 million for the police. This is petulant cops being deliberately slow. They're putting people's lives in danger because they're mad. This is exactly what the defund movement is all about. I don't agree with this comment. I think we have to look at it from a safety perspective. And Lee answers to this comment. Jeffrey, don't blame the police officers. Blame the Democrats who think they are not needed. They have every right to be angry. They risk their lives to protect ungrateful people. Less officers equals more crime. Remember that the next time you need them. And that is a perfect answer to that comment. Jeffrey's claiming that in December, they only moved $8 million to other programs, leaving $171 million for the police. But it goes above and beyond this now. It's not just transferring money anymore or saying, hold on, let's discuss police reform. No, they were slammed. They were attacked. They continue to be attacked. They fear for their lives more so than they ever have before. So although only $8 million was moved, leaving $171 million for the department, it doesn't negate the fact that psychologically and mentally they've given up because they do not want to be a part of a community where they have to walk around fearing their lives, that they're going to get shot randomly by some arrogant, stubborn resident who's trying to prove a point or has a vendetta against the police because they've attached him to the likes of Derek Chauvin. So they're scared, they're angry, they're pissed off, they're furious. And now they want nothing to do with protecting the people. We asked for it when we started attacking them and when the Democrats launched this insane defund the police movement. Raphael says the insane plan of allowing criminals to operate with impunity without consequence, it does not work for the citizens of this country. This only works for crooked politicians who want to be elected. And that's right. This whole thing started, sadly, when the violence started amongst the Black Lives Matter movement. And guess what? We had an opportunity to tell them that it was not tolerated. The Democrats had a real opportunity to tell these criminals, these violent protesters, these rioters, that they condone violence and that they don't accept it. They could have squashed it right there and then, but they didn't. Instead of squashing crime, instead of telling these criminals it's not acceptable, they condoned it. They allowed it. They bailed them out. And that set a horrible precedence that now filtered in to the Defund the Police movement and now gave criminals their blessing and sent a message that, don't worry, if your cause is great enough and it supports our narrative, we'll bail you out too. And that's exactly what's happened. In what world do we allow autonomous zones where the residents of the community now call the shots and are able to arm themselves with machine guns to defend their little area? In what country do you know where law and order doesn't work? Because I haven't heard of a single other country in this world that's actually done well by getting rid of the local police department, that has actually solved crime with hugs and cuddles. Because every country that I've traveled to, every country that I've lived in, law and order is what gave faith in the communities to behave in a very disciplinary manner. So are we done letting the Democrat play games? Are we done letting them prove to the rest of us that their defund the police movement doesn't work? When is enough enough? When do we say it's not okay that criminals continue to run wild, that Antifa continues to burn, loot, and bring down cities? To this day, it's still going on. At what point do we take our cities back? Do we take our countries back? At what point do we decide to try to restore faith in our law enforcement agencies? Minnesota may have just launched the initiative by admitting that Defund the Police was an epic fail. Derek White says, you mean you need police to stop criminals and protect the city? So odd. First, apologize. Then give them all a raise. Unless, of course, you implement your own police force. True. I think the law enforcement agencies deserve an apology. And then a raise for the absolute hell that they just went through. It's a very good comment. I agree 100%. Something needs to be done to attract them back into the agency. Because right now they're not feeling the love, understandably. Why would you ever, if you were an officer, want to go back to this nonsense? Mike says, of course they did, meaning going back on defunding the police. Of course they did. The animals are out of control. Wait until the warmer weather comes and they're out robbing everybody when the free government money runs out. I've been saying this from the very beginning. It's a phenomenal comment. When our government, at least here in New York State, started locking us down, I told my wife, I said, hun, you just wait. When the money runs out and people can no longer feed their families, what do you think's going to happen? First, they're going to start raiding your garage, because a lot of us have refrigerators in our garage with stored food, because they're going to be hungry. They're going to lose their jobs. They're not going to make enough in unemployment. And ultimately, they're going to start raiding homes for food. It'll start with garages. And then when people start to shut their garage down or their storage areas externally outside of their house, they're going to straight up start coming inside your house, because feeding their family is more important than potentially going to jail. These lockdowns that have ruined people's lives, that have destroyed families, that have bankrupted businesses, at some point, the money's going to run out. When unemployment stops, when the government can no longer provide stimulus checks. I mean, this last round, it was like pulling teeth trying to get the Republicans to agree to a deal. And rightly so, because they don't want to give any more money out. They want the economy to open up. Because when the economy opens and people are given the opportunity to make money, Americans flourish. And we don't need to feel like we need to commit crime to feed our kids. So we need money, which means we need the lockdowns to be lifted. We've been locked down so severely by now, so badly. The damage is so irreversible at this point that if you haven't already lost your job, then there's a very good chance that you just might. Because at some point, the money's going to run out. And when the money runs out, it trickles down right through the economy. And eventually, industry after industry after industry is going to get hit. There are no jobs. Unemployment is an all-time high. Poverty is an all-time high. There are more veterans starving on the streets than ever before. And illegal immigration is more important to the Biden administration than actually opening up the economy and letting us all get back to work. All of this is going to encourage crime like we've never seen before in the United States. So the best thing that these Democrat governors can do right now for their states is, one, lift the damn restrictions, and two, apologize to the police department and admit that they got it drastically wrong. So we can all feel safer knowing that these men and women are going to be out there protecting us, especially as things start to really become financially dire in the United States. Lauren says, I thought the original argument by the advocates, i.e. ACLU, Black Lives Matter, etc., was that the reallocating of federal funding towards other local services would make communities safer, especially for minorities. So I guess it didn't really go according to plan. No, of course it didn't, because when do the Democrats ever follow through with what they say they're going to follow through with? They keep telling us they're going to make life so much better for everybody. When have they ever actually done that? When have we ever seen them put this money into these local communities? Because I don't see it. I don't see them going out of their way to make communities safer. He's absolutely right. There's been no transfer or relocating of federal funding towards any of these local services. Ryan says, keep it the way it is and also take away guns like the Democrats are pushing for. Minneapolis residents will really be safe because criminals can't have guns if they are banned, right? Kind of like nobody does drugs because they are illegal. You wanted it this way, deal with it. Obviously, Ryan's being sarcastic here. He's saying, yeah, take away guns so crime goes down. No. Drugs are illegal. And drug usage and drug crime are at all-time highs once again. So just banning guns or banning drugs doesn't mean people aren't going to use them or get a hold of them. So it's a horrible idea, everything from defunding the police to taking away guns. Besides, even drugs aren't even illegal anymore. Look at Portland. Look at Oregon. I think anything goes in that state right now. And again, they're overrun by criminals and gangs and thugs as well. Democratic run. That's what you get. Ivana says defund the police is the dumbest movement ever pushed by the libs, hurting the ones it was designed to protect the most. Sean says, I say start by completely clearing out the police department and getting all new people from the community. I start there before we just give these murderers more money. Make sure you got the cancer out of the department first. I think that's a horrible idea. It's an insane idea. Because what do you think is going to happen when you have an entire agency of new law enforcement? Every single cop's a rookie in your city. Is that really the smartest thing? And we have to stop blaming an entire agency for one or two bad eggs. And this is where the media has failed miserably. They continue to highlight all the negative that goes on amongst the police community, but they never show the positive. They will only ever show you a white cop killing a black person. They'll never show you a black cop killing a black person because it doesn't fit their narrative. The story just doesn't sell. Nobody gets outraged. They don't show a white cop killing a white person because at the end of the day, it doesn't get the clicks and views that they need to pay their bills. But a white man killing a black person, well, that sells. So we're going to push that narrative and lead America to think that's the only place the problem lies. So it's no wonder that the black community is outraged, because every time they turn on the news, it's another white cop killing a black person. That's not the norm. They're only showing you a very small percentage of what really goes on. So once again, we have let the media dictate the direction our politicians head. The media has literally caused the immense amount of disaster America's faced. They brought all of this upon us. If anything, a class action lawsuit should be filed against the media for painting a very negative and inaccurate picture. Not for raising awareness, because that's not what they're doing. They're extorting a very small percentage to fit their narrative. They are not raising awareness. If you want to raise awareness, you raise awareness equally across the board. That's how you raise awareness. You show the good and the bad, and you let the people make the decision. But that is not what the media has done. They have done just the opposite. They have shown us all of the negative to raise awareness amongst a situation where only a very small percentage of crimes are actually committed. But that's what the media does. That's the only way they're going to get their ratings up and pay the bills. Paul says it is high time that we view things as they actually exist and not as we see them in some utopian world that will never be practically possible. This is a perfect example of many of the left's inability to grasp reality. It is dangerous to pursue many of these unachievable ideological pipe dreams. We do need to get real. Defund the police is a joke. Letting criminals run the streets during democratic playtime needs to come to an end, and we need to get back to law and order. And this is where I greatly appreciated having Donald Trump around. He was a big advocate and fan of law and order, and it works. It absolutely works. So Minneapolis is now going back on its word to defund the police. They're actually just doing the exact opposite. $6 million they now need to put into hiring more law enforcement, because guess what? Law enforcement are sick of it. They're sick of being attacked. They're sick of being degraded, shamed, and now we owe it to them to apologize and give them what they want, which is the respect that they deserve. If we're going to defund the police, we better see that money go back into the local communities. That is what it was originally intended for. So it's no wonder that unanimously in Minneapolis, there was a vote on Friday to invest all this money back into it, therefore being the most counterproductive movement I have ever seen. Thank you guys so much for joining me at You Made It Political. Catch us on Amazon Music, iTunes, Spotify. We're also live streamed to Facebook and YouTube every day at 3 p.m. You guys have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.